Hi. So happy to see everyone here on this dreary evening. So we're gathering tonight in Matchgon, what Miku Paul calls the truest name of this land that has since time immemorial been home to the Wabanaki Confederacy, whose sovereignty and care for this place deserve recognition and respect. With humility then, and a commitment to keep listening and learning, I would like to say how happy I am to see all of you here as we continue our reemergence after the pandemic, and are just so happy to be able to hold an in-person event again after we defaulted to online for a few years, right? So it's so nice to see you all here in person. Thank you very much. I'm Jennifer Tuttle. I'm the Dorothy M. Healy Professor of Literature and Health, and as such, I'm the director of the Maine Women Writers Collection. And as a teacher and a scholar, I have spent my career finding inspiration in the archives, where so many untold stories find their voice. And I often explain to my UNE students that the archives, like the MWWC, are the humanities equivalent of their science labs. But our researchers make knowledge while cracking open acid-free folders and deciphering cursive, rather than messing about with beakers and pipettes and microscopes. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. We're a resource for poets and dreamers and activists and all who are curious. And just as we collect and preserve and celebrate existing work, we're really committed to growing new writing and inspiring new writing, whether it be through the gathering of writers' workshops that we offer a few times a year, or the workshops that Jefferson Navicky leads here under the auspices of the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance, or our Creative Fellowship Program, among other things. So I'm especially excited to be with all of you tonight to hear from two poets about the inspiration they draw from our holdings. I'm going to introduce our speakers briefly, and then I'm going to turn things over to them, and after which we will have time for conversation. I'd also like to thank several people who made this event possible, and they include Sarah Baker, our curator, our metadata librarian, Laura Taylor, our archivist, Jefferson, the UNE Office of Communications, and especially Dave Dadiego for all of the incredible tech support, Parkhurst for the catering, as well as UNE's housekeeping and facilities staff. Everyone has to do their part in order for something like this to work. I'd also like to just remind you to silence your cell phones, please, and hold all questions until both speakers have shared their presentations, and then we'll have lots of time for that. So let me just say a few words to introduce them, so you have a little bit more of an idea of their many accomplishments. Beth Alison Jones is a poet who lives and works in central Maine. Most recently, she's the author of the chapbook, What It Means to Be a Half-Blind Horse. Her work has appeared in venues such as the Georgia Review, West Branch, Prairie Schooner, Poetry Daily, Shenandoah, River Styx, Cimarron Review, and the Adirondack Review. She's the recipient of many honors, including the River Styx International First Place Poetry Prize, a Maine Arts Commission Springboard Grant, the Isabella Gardner Fellowship at the McDowell Colony, a Community of Writers Conference Scholarship, a Hedgebrook Residency for Women Writers, and a UCross Foundation Residency for Artists, among others. She currently teaches college composition at Thomas College. And our second speaker is Jefferson Navicky, who's the author of 4 books, the most recent being Head of Island Beautification, for the Rural Outlands from 2023, as well as Antique Densities, Modern Parables, and Other Experiments on Short Prose from 2021. That won the 2022 Maine Literary Award for Poetry. His fiction, nonfiction, and poetry have appeared in American Poetry Review, Smoke Along Quarterly, Electric Literature, Beloit Poetry Journal, and Southern Humanities Review. He is the recipient of grants from the Maine Arts Commission, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Ellis Beauregard Foundation, as well as 2 additional Maine Literary Awards for poetry and drama. Jefferson works as the archivist for the Maine Women Writers Collection, and this spring, the collection has also been the locus, as I said, of his MWPA workshop on writing in the archives. So without further ado, I will turn this over to our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for the introduction. Nice to see everybody here. It's a real treat to be able to read some of these poems with Beth and in the place where I work, which is right over there. So I'm going to read some poems that I haven't read any of these poems. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, good. Dave, yeah, okay, good. So I've only read a couple of these aloud, but they mainly started writing them in the pandemic when I was basically in here by myself, and it's kind of changed my relationship maybe with the space and thinking about it. So these are poems that are sometimes about objects, also about history and the past and time and how time moves at this slow pace in the archive, and about mortality, because it's something that maybe we don't talk about as much, but for us who work in the archive, like we're faced with mortality like all the time, people passing in and out of our lives, and whether, I don't think about it actually all that much, because if I did, I wouldn't get anything done, but poems are a good place to put those thoughts. So I'm going to read a few of those. Oh, and this is another real pleasure that I never would get to do this in any other venue except for here, but I grabbed a few of the objects that have inspired the poems, so I don't know, I'll hold them up. And if you want to look at them afterwards, you'll be welcome to. So this is a birch bark envelope from 1885. That's the title of the poem, so I'm going to read it. That it survives is amazing enough. Perfectly folded, only the glue gone, and for 2 cents she mailed it. Time, in this case, is not so much chronological as it is a dye applied in a thin layer to turn the flecked white bark to a musty beige color, a lightly tanned leather color tinted from over 100 years of light. Age shows on the skin, and while it gently wrinkles humans, it only tints an envelope, so that it's as if when I pull the envelope from its archival reinforced acid-free folder, I'm pulling it from the past's shade. But rather than emerge into the present sunlight like I might when I walk from the library out into the parking lot blinded and furiously shading my eyes and blinking, rather than that, it's as if the envelope brings the past's shade with it in its body as a cloth, a covering to protect it from the harshness of the present day, and to mark it as ancient and sacred. In this way, to remember the past and to take it in your hands is to allow yourself to be shaded by it, to be tinted by time. This next poem is called Archivist Job Description. And it's exactly what it is, and it was inspired by some of the processing of the Kate Barnes papers, who was the first poet laureate of Maine, and it has an epigraph from her, one of her journals. I dreamt I found the way to draw deer and branches, the woods. I was so happy. I felt I had really solved something. What you had to do was draw the deer inside separate eggs, egg shapes, and then to fill in the spaces between with leaves. It's such a weird quote. I really love it. Some days I describe my job as a puller out of boxes, a putter back of boxes, a deluxe paper sorter, a human filing robot, a professional staple remover. But the mundane picks its head up when I process the poet's papers, whole bins full of pictures thrown in, like life's bathtub dumped. A photo of the poet at 3 years old, black and white, charging the camera, her power already present across her brow. The poet at her wedding with a shy smile, her husband young and broody, not yet the man who will slam her face to the floor. They are happy together. Tender and nervous, the poet's mother behind them laughs and tosses rice. The poet naked astride a horse as they cross a river. Nothing but concentrated joy, bas-reliefed on her face. The poet surrounded by her babies in a California desert kitchen. The precious creatures who will keep her from writing for over 20 years. The poet back east and alone in her 60s on her porch with her dog, accruing accolades after a return to writing. The poet sick now but smiling, surrounded by her grown children, so many photos of her children. The unsent letters to her ex-husband. The drawings of horses and dogs, poems about deer and more horses. Everything in these cheap plastic bins from Rennie's, filled with mouse poop and dust and mold, and the ache I don't tell anyone about at work for this beautiful life that passes in front of me like a movie where I can't believe the end. Death is the photo that isn't here. The surprise ending I know is coming. Even though I know her date of death, attended her memorial service, I startle at the thought she's not with us anymore. Her kids, now old people, all her horses dead, so too the asshole ex-husband, the farm she loved, sold, all her beloved dogs, the wolfhound and 2 Bernese mountain dogs. I'm left to sift through her memories, her mind, what others thought of her, sent to her, wrote about her, all of it here in front of me. My responsibility now, me, a 40-something white man without kids, with a loving wife and dog, a love of poetry and history, a fairly organized mind, a sense of duty, a growing fear of death, a weakening body, and an awareness of my mounting insignificance, which comes mostly as a relief. So when I say I pull paper clips for a living, it's because I can't always stand to say the truth. I'm given a poet's body in bins, and I put it back together, only to watch her die in a finding aid. I will carry her forever in the small filing cabinet of my chest. I will remember how her life arced in front of me, covered me with words and dust and longing, gave me a place for my longing to live forever, all with the hope that others will come find her and carry her with them too. I made it through that poem without crying. But now I feel like I'm crying a little bit. It always happens all the time when I read, so don't worry about it. This is a poem about this little thing. It's called a bone folder. Bodies decay, and I catch them. What is my rate of degradation? What is my arc in this narrative? How do I change here? If nothing else, I age right before your eyes. Amazing how old my eyes look when I remove my glasses. Like the lenses redirect or deflect, somehow distract from the obvious fact that my arc is going down. Dust as evidence of life collects at the bottom of bins, time spent unorganized and thrown in. A bone folder is a favorite for many archivists. Its straight-edge creases for custom enclosures or what have you. Whatever you might need. Whose bone? Don't know. Real bone? It's easier to fold death when you don't think about it and just try to make the perfect crease. So of course even though I don't think about it, there's all these things that are going on in the world, but usually when I hear, I don't try to think about them, that this was a day that it kind of seeped in a little bit. It's kind of hard to keep Elon Musk out of your head sometimes. There are days when I don't want to be living in the 21st century. I resent it. I don't even want to live in the 20th century. The 19th is as modern as I want. As I write this, there is a battle over outer space. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are Twitter dueling over whose space plan is better, whose brand of effective altruism will better address our existential risk. What is more feasible, space travel or time travel? I choose time travel. I choose the archive. Our technologies are quaint in archives compared to Bezos's blue origin. We simply keep things. Like your grandmother, the borderline hoarder, we never throw things out. And it is the effect of accumulation that creates our time travel machine. It is a machine that generates space, but inward space, the kind created by movable stacks and row after row of boxes. Organization allows us to expand time like the theory that space is infinite because it is always possible to have the distance between here and there, between now and the past. Musk used his old Tesla Roadster as a rocket. Bezos wants to create giant cylinders spinning majestically to create artificial gravity. I use nothing so complicated. I use handwriting. There's a certain scrawl to the fountain pens of the late 19th century, a certain slant to the penmanship, the way letters thicken and thin with the nibs tilt, a certain grace to the throwaway elegance of in-house hotel letterhead that floats me back as if transported by horse and carriage. And I realize my escape of the 21st century is just as much an escape as theirs to the stars. What to do with this phrase, you can never go home again? I know it's home if I'm homesick for it and I've never been there. Not in this life. Dear archive, give me the past. Take me home. This is Caleb, 1891. This is about a phenomenon that often happens to me here. How many times will this happen before I am no longer shocked? Will the shock ever lessen? And what exactly is the shock? I look at an alarmingly cute baby portrait. A baldy blonde fellow sitting in a diaper on a bed holding some cuddly cloth thing. He can't be more than 1 year old, and he possesses a chub of a scrumptious order. His little arms look like blown-up balloons, and his little mouth is an exclamation of joy. The verso reads, Caleb, 1891. That means even if this baby lived to be an ancient old man, he would still be long dead. Well over a century ago, and there is his spotless chub, begging to be gently pinched and tickled in order to release that golden laugh. Of course, it's shocking that I too will die, like Caleb did, and it's shocking that any baby so cute will die, and it's shocking that the long exposure large format camera that first began to open its shutter in the late 19th century is still open today, capturing images of us as we look now, but we will never look this way again. Okay, so just two more, and this is a little prose piece about finishing the Elizabeth Coatsworth papers in the middle of the pandemic, and maybe I had a little bit too much time to myself in my own head, so it's On Doneness. It's called. I say I'm done. I tell everyone about it. I slap 47 box labels on 47 boxes, stacked neatly in the manuscript room. But I can't decide whether to say slap or affix. Slap sounds casual, fast, and confident, which was the opposite of reality. Reality, slow, painstaking, and not very confident that every box label was straight and centered. But I want to sound confident and like I'm the kind of person who gets so much accomplished I'm a whirlwind of efficiency. Yet I also like the word affix for its carefully adhesive connotation, except that it sounds like I'm putting indentures or attaching a lawn ornament in a cement pour. Whatever the word, I'm still finished with 47 boxes worth of work, which honestly took years to complete with interruptions from the pandemic to furloughs to vacations to job searches to myriad other rinky-dink pressing duties. But now, I should throw myself a party, but instead I'll go back to work inside another mound of papers, which has been piling up in the basement for months, because let's all be honest here, I'll never be completely finished. There will always be a pile of papers that needs sorting or ordering. I suppose there's job security in knowing time will keep dumping its detritus on me. And then this last poem is inspired by some of the letters from Kate Barnes to Elizabeth Coatsworth's mother, and then another picture that I found somewhere that I don't remember. It might not even been in here. A kindred spirit, unidentified black and white photo of woman with bat. The woman with the bat, perched, wings outstretched on her head, stares ahead, fixed like the bat is a book she must keep still to keep level. Life in the back then, black and white, possessed intense tint. Photo tucked within all those letters bundled with a brittle rubber band, stuffed into a moldy manila envelope marked from the first 3 months of college. All those letters from daughter to mother signed, "All my love," with dearest love to you, with much, much love your own. Love always. All love from your daughter, dearest one, darling. Where does all my love go? As if there's a deep top hat perched atop a head to catch all lighter than air love. Maybe love's a rabbit pulled from the bottomless well by its ever-loving ears, and before our eyes, poof, it's a bird, but a dove, but not a dove, something blacker, with its mesh wings outspread to dry from all that cascading love dripping from its body, sun to do its bright evaporation. Can we live off photosynthesis? Forgot an important word. Can we live off love's photosynthesis? I can't help but wonder if there was more love back there in those black and white days. More love sung straight from hearts less burdened by irony, sarcasm, the hard laugh that comes with nihilism, or the "I told you so" smirk. No, I know no one today who would dress funeral best and plop a bat atop her head. That kind of love is dead. Long live love. Bats only live 20 years or so. That doesn't seem long enough. Thank you, everybody. I'll turn it over to Beth. I'm excited to hear about these poems.
So, my name is Beth Jones, and I started coming here about a year ago because I was reading about the archives, and I am a history, but I just love history. I come from a long line of tinkers and Methodist preachers, and it's just, it thrills me for no good reason, except that I love it. And I've noticed too that a lot of students I see have no real reference point, that we share this history, and so many are quite cut off. So it compelled me even more to come to the archives and see. And you can see this incredible rifle, and is it Josephine Perry? Is that, it's amazing that it's all here. So these are poems that are directly, they directly take the material from Isabel Hoffses' diaries. In particular, in the 1860s, I was really looking for poems that would reflect a woman's voice who was a working woman. I mean, a working woman, like a farm woman. It was pretty hard to do, but I came across her journals, and her voice was so transporting and so familiar. It's a voice that should be heard. So I have abstracted lines from her and shaped these dramatic soliloquies in sonnet form and a little bit of dramatic narrative. These are internal monologues, deeply, deeply touching to me. And she did suffer from mental health issues, which were very misunderstood, if at all. She was single. She had a lot against her just for being single. She was ill with what looked like depression and in poverty and homeless. Other than that, she was an incredible example of will. So I'd love to start this off. This is her purest voice. I have tampered with the form. It is definitely a dramatic soliloquy, and my words are in there with her words, but I want you to hear her voice. And she was one who repeated words, like we all do in journals, and repeated phrases, and perseverated on certain things about her life. You'll hear this. Providence, 1861. I am at home, a hated presence. Quiet and silent, I must be thankful for food and shelter, not to speak about a thing. Venturing, my mind shoots forward to a hereafter. Providence seems to have placed me here, unreconciled, at mother's home. I am so unlike what I would like. I seem to myself to be dying, 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 mentally and physically. I must arise from the dead and write, but have used up all the nervous energy I possess. I ought not borrow. I ought not steal another hour. My life seems wasted. My life, one great failure. My life feels badly all the time. Ought I instead welcome sickness, welcome adversity, welcome trials, for without thee, I might forget myself. The campaign, April 1861. I will say that there's not a mention of the Civil War, but it was happening, and it was taking family members and town members of her little burg, Waldoboro, Maine. The campaign, April 1861. How I fumble, stabbing to mend to passable circumstance my mother's wools. The day appears in the field and swells. Our boys have just marched south. I am cold as kerosene, her constant companion. I've hardly slept, but whosoever does. My brothers, how long will it last us? Okay. So moving along, these are not easy poems to absorb, so they take a little moment and just absorb. But I will continue because she is a perseverating force, isn't she? She's just a perseverating force and has reached us. I must have society, October 1862. She says this a lot. I must have society. And again, this is my shaping of and abstracting of her language and including my own. My dress was rent by wind. I've put another 100 stitches under the arm, down the sleeve, inside the collar, the epaulette, and all the while I was ashamed. If my folks were not indifferent to me, that we may talk a while. But I lie in bed in perpetual recovery, and so they curse me from below. I curse them too. A cloud bank is in the glass. My body and mind have been unwell, and I barely see anyone, but I like that. I read Virgil and Milton, skipping parts. I don't understand the snake, or do I? The devil himself sits with me, sometimes my sole companion, and I listen, knowing I shouldn't. Hence my doubtful nature about this nature of my own inability to be good. I may not have been baptized. I may not have been saved. This too is blasphemous, and there is nowhere I can see anyone persistent with mental pain quite like myself. Last night, the pills helped very much and brought about a dreamless sleep. I woke again, sun higher than it should have been, its bands inflaming me into want. If I could mend myself as such, I would and heal the egregious inflammatory eyes and this forking of my tongue. She then starts to teach herself to teach and reads deeply and has notes about her readings. I have invented I've invented or imagined that she's read Darwin and that she was reading Milton quite closely so she could teach it. There are these notes that look like transcriptions and summary. So this is called Reading Darwin, winter term 1863. My present state of mind may be religious, something to try my faith to overcome, or a natural state of grieving the spirit. In this case, I must face about. God will disregard me otherwise, and this feral thinking, no mind but fear, will beget question upon question on the veracity of one's faith, whether the water burned upon my head. We are we not, fallen, our senses standing in with nature. I hate that I am not what I would like to be. I have no reason to disbelieve, and only reason. I hear them squelching in the kitchen, the whole house stinking of sharp apple. Just have a couple more. Teaching notes, 1864. So she uses the word scholars, and she's referring to her students. And she apparently had a strong hand in the classroom. I did read that in the Waldoboro Historical Society. There was a letter that said, "Oh yes, your Aunt Isabel hit me, or hit my grandfather, or some such." There were really, it was the old ways of the 1800s, of course, in this classroom, and teachers were revered, if not feared. So this is her voice to start, and of course, mixed with my words and my shaping. Lazy. You'll never find such pleasures in your soft bed when shameful slumber closes your weary eyes. There dreams interrupt your sleep and many cares disturb you. Read aloud for the meaning of each intended, to teach this way against the grain of scholars, itching to run outside and catch what they can. Each ray falls like a downed branch across the glass of my single pane, latched to the blasting winds of Broad Bay and misery, yet they wheeze here. None whomsoever knows but I, this one dream abed. For penniless, homeless, and sick as I am, I don't hope to marry off, but only to leave this wretched house. Here the seeds of wasting illness breed. What strength can there be in laziness? I will become my own, reading scriptures, and the poem's once familiar hell. My will hangs for heresy with the weight of a pen. Two more. So this is called Preparing for Massachusetts because she was able to go. And even though Massachusetts was up into Waldoboro, by the way, at some point it became, Maine became sovereign, all the way up there. Preparing for Massachusetts, April 7, 1864. A pleasant morning, and I live such an unbearable life at home that I have great reason to go. Ground bare and frozen, I awoke. There is not of my family for whom I have any pleasant regard. These are not good folks, and yet they may be better than I. What have I done to get the ill will of my folks? I crave of them a thing of theirs that they are incapable of giving. I live unbearable seclusions. My own frailties ought to teach me about charity of heart. God is dealing with just right with me, for isn't this the result of my own deserved illness? Perhaps, Mother, no, I'm sorry to be a difficulty. Let communications amount to yea, yea, nay, nay, and nothing more. I am sorry to have yielded to my heart and not my mind, or my mind's circulating news, its subscriptions, with the timing of a weather front. So my last poem is an amalgam of things she says, these wise things she says or transcribes, and then I've tried to shape things and, of course, brought things from the Waldoboro Historical Society, letters, notes. They keep scrupulous records of their history on Broad Bay, Muscongas Bay. Also the land of the Abenaki and the Penobscot tribes. This poem is called I Must Keep in Constant Commiseration with My Soul, October 1862. A cloud on the face of nature, laden with blessing, presents foreboding aspects. Where are the boys, and what are they seeing? Should I wonder out loud? Of course not. I'm going out to get my dress dyed. I've been thinking how material influences body and mind, how imagination is the broad road by which nearly every single bad passion enters the soul. When the mind is healthy and pure, imagination is a source of consolation and pride. And the only way I can control it at all is by fixing thoughts on a single thing and holding the stern mandates of the will. I love to be alone on Sunday. Here I am at home, the place of all places where I dislike to be. It seems strange enough. 1 year has made a great change. I am subdued. No longer am I hot-headed, determined, energetic, and yet I am in debt. Health woes mount, and no work. I cannot take the world by storm. I ought to be thankful for food and shelter, but how hard to be dependent. Where shall I go with such a weight, such a woe? Go to Jesus. Why did I take my pen? I earnestly deserve to have all the bitterness rooted out of my heart. I've arrived at St. George. I took my pen, of course. I felt like writing to the folks this morning, but I am managing to kill my time. Why did I take my pen? If I could make a feeble sentence today, may I forgive and be forgiven. I took my pen. There is nothing to record. It is no use to quarrel with the world. We must take things by the smooth handle. When born of the Spirit, we become new creatures. If we do not, our fathers will beat us with more stripes. I took my pen. St. George, render me of use.
Thank you both so much. I am still in awe. That was incredible. Really, thank you so much for those wonderful poems and presentations. So we have plenty of time for conversation, and I just wanted to let everyone know that we are recording this event for posterity. And because we're recording, the only thing that gets into the recording is what goes into a microphone. So if you have comments, questions, would you kindly just wait for us to pass it to you and speak into it so that we get your question recorded, okay? But now, other than that, saying that, I'm going to turn this over to our speakers. Is there anyone who has a comment or question for them? I'm going to be, this is dating myself, Phil Donahue. And then when you're done, I'll move this around.
Beth, first of all, it's just such a joy to listen to work from both of you, truly. We don't get to listen to poetry every day. At least some of us don't. Beth, what drew you to Isabel's work? Or how did you stumble upon it, and then what drew you to it? I have a friend who has roots in Waldoboro, so I'll have to be in touch with you sometime later, but yeah.
What drew me to Isabel Hoffses was her voice. How did you find her? I wanted to find a rural voice of Maine. I grew up in rural Maine in Midcoast, not too far from Waldoboro, a place called North Newcastle. And I have deep roots in Maine as a woman. And I also have family members who have had struggles with feeling the oppression of being a woman. There's a family story that I won't go into now, but essentially my grandmother being farmed out because her father died. So her mother was unable to afford her kids. And that's a story that is very common. I was looking for a voice in that way. And I opened, it was on your online website. The website has these wonderful little snippets or summaries of who is who and what they care about. And I knew the Coatsworth and Kate Barnes-Idor and Constance Hunting. But her biography made me want to come down here. Yeah. School teacher. She was if I didn't say that, she was a school teacher. Yeah.
Sorry, I guess I'm just full of questions, and I'm sure there's some on others' minds. But as someone who worked as a student in college archives many, many years ago, Jefferson, I can't help but think like, oh my gosh, other students and professionals who work in archives, I think would really enjoy reading some of your work. So however you might share it through those channels, I encourage you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, that would be it would be an honor to inspire other people. Yeah, thanks.
Hi. Hello. I just finished taking Jefferson's course that he offered here, Writing in the Archives. And one of the first boxes that I went through, and I can't remember the name now, it was a daughter, a rural family, and it was their date, it was diaries, and it was their writing her day to day to day to day. It was during the Civil War, part of it, and what struck me is this voice and your voices, because it was as if nothing was happening in the world except feeding the cows, tending the land, mending the clothes. The laundry was a big thing. When she got married, it was just all of a sudden she started talking about Jake. And then she had a young daughter. I only got that far, but never anything about the child except very concrete sequential facts. She didn't sleep, and a lot of pronouns. She didn't sleep well last night. What will I do with her this afternoon? So I was just thinking that my grandmother also traveled across the country during the Depression, and we have her diaries, and they're very much, it's hard to find her voice. Today we're in Wichita. It is cold. So what you all have and have shared is just so rich. to find voices like that you've, and your voice, Jefferson, just so rich with, because I think for many, and I was really mesmerized by the number of diaries and her not breaking, except for one time. And that's when her mother died. And she just mentioned that this was the day her mother died. And then as I flipped over to another little booklet, she was just talking about the laundry, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I miss my mother. Today I miss my mother." But that was all. And I think maybe it was just, it took all they had to live. It took all they had, yeah. So this was amazing to hear. I just wanted to
Hi, I loved both of your readings. Thank you so much. So I don't even quite know how to form this, but it's a question I think of a lot. Like, you're working with other people's lives, and so there's a certain commitment to that, but you're also making art, and those two things aren't synonymous. How do you think in your own minds about that work, how to convey somebody's life well at the same time you're changing it, you know?
I know. I thought of that. Is exactly right. I justify it because I think this was a woman who really wanted a lot more, and I think she would have wanted to have been heard. In the way Emily Dickinson or someone, she wanted to write poems. She wanted to write a hymn for herself upon her own death, because that's the 19th century focus was very much about death and dying. I mean, she was kind of doing that mentally a lot, day to day. I did a technique, as I was breaking these up, I realized, my gosh, these are dramatic soliloquies. These are shapeable, and I can still maintain the integrity of her voice, but they are definitely in that genre, and that's how I justified it. I also was inspired by an interview I saw on TV with David Bowie, who one of his techniques of writing, he created Ziggy Stardust by cutting up newspapers, looking at journals, grabbing space, and then just, and then creating a collage. And in some ways, there are collage, these are collages. Wow. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Hi. You mentioned the father dying and having to sell the children. My daughter's terrified. I'm going to ask what the going rate is for children. I told you I'd ask. I have a serious question, though. Jefferson, I know that you have a lot of tools in your toolbox. You write fiction. Both of you guys do. I wonder how a story presents itself to you and how you decide whether this is going to be a poem or it's going to be a prose piece. How does that come to you? I guess I'm aiming this at you, Jefferson.
Yeah, Zach, that's a good question. Not one that I can totally answer in a satisfying way, Like, I think it's just sort of a feeling. Like, like it's kind of in the dark, and it's like you kind of pull something out, and it just feels like this thing. And it just kind of goes that direction, which is not I don't think that doesn't seem like a very satisfying answer to me, but like when I look at it on the page, I think like, well, that's the only way that it could come out,
So poems don't come out of a failed short story.
No, not really. No.
This is a catastrophe. I'm going to start cutting words.
I think that I have tried that a couple times, and they're big disasters. Like, it's just, it makes me feel like I got it wrong. There was one time where I had a short story that I moved it into a poem, and the poem was so much better than the whole short story. I was like, okay, this is the only time it's worked. But, yeah.
Thanks.
These are comments that I would make to each of you personally if we spoke afterwards. Beth, my mother was a mental health patient and homeless in the mid-20th century. So this was a very meaningful, obviously. I think it's meaningful for everybody, so don't misunderstand me. It helped me, so I worked hard on getting insights into what happened to her, and I've only been writing her story for 25 or 30 years, and it'll get done, I think, but it's sort of to be able to get inside of where the person is coming from. It was so important. I thank you. And Jefferson, my only comment to you is your phrase, the filing cabinet of my chest, is just profound.
Other comments or questions? Yeah. My hand is right back here.
Maybe a silly one. Are there archives you wish you hadn't read?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't read everything. You know, I kind of, it's just like a pick and choose on what I have to read to kind of get things in the right order. Although sometimes there are things I can't help but read. Are there things that I mean, not really. No, I mean, I think one of the I consider it profound things of processing people's collections, which is an inherently intimate act. Like, these are papers that people don't necessarily think anybody is going to read. But when I kind of move through them, one of the things that I kind of always notice is, like, you know, they're just struggling with the same things that we all struggle with. You know, they maybe look a little different over here, but when it's down on paper and it's, you know, we're all struggling with the same kind of similar things, and it's sort of a comfort. So I don't think I ever regret seeing those things.
I'm just so struck by both your voices. Just the line you talked about, the Jefferson, you know, and your sculpturing, you know, her voice, this woman. It's, even though I took this course here, I have a much deeper appreciation and understanding of what is here and what an archive really is. And so thank you.
Beth, do you have thoughts or plans? I mean, everybody always wishes, I suppose, but thoughts about how you might make this work, take it out into the public, publish it, I guess. That's a terrible word sometimes, but anyway, you know. Because it would be a wonderful thing to read as a whole body of work.
Well, you know, that would be wonderful. I do have a lot of other things that I'm writing based on her journals. The relationship with her mother, the landscape itself has a vibe, a voice there. The cemetery, the church, the German church. It's such a rich thing. It's such a rich time, to say nothing of the Civil War or the Abenaki or the Penobscot, whose territory that is. But I don't want to get into that. I want to stay on the level of this woman's development to the extent that I can, and that is workable. You know, where she's going is toward, she's self-propelled. It's her will, it's her mind. And she has this uncanny ability to strike out and continue moving one foot in front of the other to get herself out of a very dark space. And with just these little pills that might help her stomach, but she was very misunderstood by her family, according to her journal.
Well, I think it would be a wonderful contribution, not only, well, it's language can be hard, but to open another window to rural Maine, to that time, and mental health, and the whole panoply of, the whole collage of her life. And this is an unrelated, sort of mundane question, and that is maybe for Jefferson. So people don't write letters so much these days, and what does the collection do for contemporary authors whose work you may, or in the last 20 years, I guess, whose work you're interested in, which is maybe all online or on email and that whole piece of business?
Well, yes, that's a whole other question. Yeah, and certainly Jennifer and Sarah, we talk about this stuff, and Laura, who's our metadata librarian, I think she was working on an email archive system. Those are the kinds of things that I think we'll be looking at in the future, ways to digitally archive email. That's going to be a big thing. Yeah. But I don't think it's ever going to get away from the power of notes and letters. And maybe people don't write letters all the time, but people write things down, and we'll happily accept those. Yeah.
I have a quick question, and then I want to see if anyone else is thinking about asking one. Beth, you mentioned that you did a lot of historical research outside the diary. And I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about some of the things that you learned in the course of doing that research in terms of how they may have illuminated things or provided a different context for things you were reading about in the diary itself?
Well, I haven't done a lot of research, but I was allowed to go into the Waldoboro Historical Society while they were closed down for the season, into this cold space, and this lovely man helped me gather all the Hoffses material, which was just letters or notes. And one thing I did notice right off the bat was how few women were remembered in these lists. If they were not married, they were not in the list. Isabel is number 2 of 12 children, and I don't even think she's on the family list, but her brothers, David is, and there's another brother as well, and of course her parents. But it's extraordinary that if you were not married, you were erased in kind of erased and put into that what some archivists call the silent landscape, and you also were not allowed to have a place in the cemetery, and there's a pauper grave for unmarried women, at least in the records that I was reading. So it's very hard to find any record of Isabel Hoffses, even though she's a well-known teacher down there, well-known still. She had a power, as you can hear. She had a power to articulate experience and to teach, and so that did influence me. I realized it's even more important for us to raise these voices and to have an archive and to have a historical record, if it's not kept at the Historical Society. It's an amazing thing to go through a record of the history of a place, and right all the way back into the 1600s. There's a very careful record. I don't know who was keeping it, but it's extraordinary. The events that happened, how the over 4,000 acres were set up for German settlers. 1,500 of them came over in 1740 and 1751 through 1751, and the Hoffses were part of that. It's really something to see how those families were intended to take up space so the indigenous people could not come back in, and it's very, very hard to read, but very there for sure.
Many layers of erasure happening.
Many colonizing.
Yeah. Displacing, erasing, silencing. Wow, that's really interesting. thank you. Who's next? Yes, Harriet.
So, families in that period of time, it was very common to have a dozen children. My grandfather came from a dozen children. So, and then you said that she was the second child. Was the first child a boy or a girl?
I don't remember, but the list is somewhere.
Okay,
And-
well,
yeah, I
my,
don't
my
remember.
comment is, as we know, and it still is true, that the oldest child, particularly if it's a girl, will be just like a mother. She's taking care of all of the younger children, and what a huge burden. It would break anybody, I think. So,
Other comments or questions?
Take up so much space, but I just have to add a spring note. These are such serious topics, and they're wonderful and wonderful, but I also hope people will take in Frost's First Gold as they come and go this time of year in spring. Everybody calls Christmas the season of light, but actually spring is the season of light.
It's very helpful. I wish that Isabel could hear that. Other comments? Yep, go.
Are there ghosts here?
I don't know. Jennifer, are there ghosts here?
I don't know. Probably. Don't you think?
I think so. Sarah, what do you think?
Does anyone know of any particular ghosts, though? You must tell us if you do. They don't always
Bobby?
identify
You know
themselves.
any
Bobby? No? That's a great question.
That was just to get people in.
We are right next door to Evergreen Cemetery. So, well, I wanted to say another thing that I've been thinking about, which is, Jefferson, one of the many things I love about your work is that you bring to life and to voice a figure in the archival process who is usually invisible and silenced and not considered. So many people just disregard the role of the archivist. They, as you so well put it, imagine that they're pulling out the staples and putting things in folders and, robot-like, as you say. And I just, I feel like you have added so much depth for all of us to be thinking about what happens here, and what each of the different humans is doing, and just the humanity of the archivist, whoever is there. It's you in this case, but you really, it's just such food for thought, and so it's so humanizing. And I'm always so moved by that poem and by all your work. So, thank you.
I've been thinking about, you could either be despairing or elevated by all this, and it just occurred to me, you're sort of like a hospice nurse, bringing value to these things.
It does feel like bringing value, yeah.
Okay, well, I will come back up here to say, first of all, thank you to our brilliant speakers. And secondly, thank you to each and every one of you wonderful people who came to be here in person with us and hear them read their work. There's just something greater than the sum of its parts, right, when this happens. And it means a lot to me, again, especially, as we're reemerging after the pandemic. It's just really lovely to have all of you here in this space again. So thank you again. The speakers will be around, and I hope you'll continue to mingle and talk and ask questions, and of course enjoy the food, which there's still plenty of. Okay, have a good evening. Thank you.